I can walk around. Excellent. Now, the first thing is I got up at 4 o'clock this morning to get here on time, so if I can stay awake through this, hopefully you guys can as well. I've been sitting at the back. It's hard to tell. I did do a little tweet. I'm sort of heckling, but it's hard to tell who's sort of writing notes and who's just having a little noddy, but if you can hang in there. My first question is, who here already has a job lined up when you finish studying? Okay, a couple of you. For the rest of you, there's stuff in here that's really important for you. Okay, the last lady was, I've already forgotten, Vanessa, wasn't it? You know, she talked about passion. Well, one of my passions is helping people like you find a job, which might sound weird because I do other stuff as well, but through this sort of weird sort of bunch of circumstances, I found myself in a position where I talked to a whole heap of people, both in Australia and overseas, about how to get a job, and put it in a book, and that's how I ended up being here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, where do I point this? There you go. So yes, hello and please stay awake, there you go. So I'm going to take you through, I'm not really going to talk much about what we do as a company. If you want to know that, then email me or don't look at the website, the website's rubbish. We're always our own worst clients. But I am going to talk to you a little bit about my journey because there's some great lessons in there to share with you. And then a few little hints and tips and stuff that might come in handy for you. So I'm going to talk about getting a job, survival, making a living, and running. Now the first thing is when I give a talk, for people who don't know me, I'm up here with people like from PayPal and Vodafone and all that sort of stuff, and you go, yeah, I know who those guys are, but who the hell is this? And of course, one of the things I say is if you're going to listen to someone's advice, it's kind of important that you know who they are and what they're about. Because opinions are like, and I've got to watch my language, but you know, opinions are like bottoms. Everyone's got one, and as the old saying goes, some of them stink. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my journey, and then you can decide whether my advice is useful to you or whether you can completely ignore it. So my background was I started opening the mail at an advertising agency in what now seems like 1756. It wasn't quite that long ago. I worked for a few big agencies, a few small ones. I've been sacked a few times. In fact, I've been sacked quite a few times. And so one of the lessons here is it's not just about getting a job, but keeping one. And so, you know, a lot of you will be focused on getting that first job, and that's fantastic. But of course, that sort of process doesn't necessarily end when you get your first job. I think when I grew up, there was this sort of idea that you got a job and you kind of lived there for your entire life and then you retired and died. And of course, now the world is a lot different and whole industries come and go in, 10 minutes. So you're probably a lot more used to the idea that you're probably not going to have the same job, for longer than maybe 2 years, 5 years, 6 years, something like that. But when I started, it was a lot different to that. And of course, now I do my own thing because it's harder to get sacked when you're the boss. Not impossible. So yeah, that was the book. I'm going to skip through. Now, when I came up with the idea of the book, we called it, I'll sort of just show there, The Swashbuckler's Guide to Becoming an Astronaut. Because I figured that an astronaut was something that was really hard to become, and I thought that's a bit like getting into the industry. But I saw this picture on Richard Branson's feed during the week, and that's all the new astronauts for his Virgin Galactic venture. So I now think that probably becoming an astronaut might actually be easier than getting into marketing and advertising. I'm not sure, but it's getting close, that's for sure. I started my first job at a little place called Clemenger BBDO. It was just one of those real luck of the draw things. So I basically landed on my feet. And my first glamorous job was doing a thing called opening the mail. So when I was about 18, there was a thing called letters, and you would post them to people. And when you wanted to send something to a client for approval, you had to put it in a bag and give it to a courier and send it into the city, and they would look at it and they would make some notes, and then they would put it in a bag and send it back. And so someone had to do that, which is fantastic because it's an entry-level job that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so that was my job, and I did that for a little while. How long did Vanessa say she did her job? 8 months or something, right? 3.5 years. Okay, so I opened the mail for 3.5 years. Now, in hindsight, that's probably stupid, right? I was probably a little bit too patient, but I was at Clemenger, right? And Clemenger are one of the best agency groups in the world. So I hung in there, and I did do some advertising while I was in the mail department. So I actually won my first advertising award while I was the mail guy, because the creative guys would give me briefs to work on. And so 3.5 years, I opened the mail, worked my guts out, finally got a job in creative, lasted 6 months and then got sacked, right? So I was, maybe a 20, 21-year-old kid at the time, and I thought, oh my God, my life is over, and I went home and cried and dreamt about sort of smashing the managing director's Mercedes-Benz, and all that sort of stuff. But I picked myself up, and by the way, that was my first lesson. You know, you don't take the foot off the accelerator once you get your first job. I kind of got in the job and put my feet up and went, woohoo, I've made it. Important lesson. Luckily, I fell on my feet and found another job at a place called Burnett, which just happens to be another pretty big agency group, so I was pretty happy with myself. And I learnt another really important lesson here when one day my creative director gave me some slightly unexpected feedback when he said that to me. And it was a little bit of a misunderstanding, but needless to say, my time at Burnett finished after about 12 months when he sort of suggested I should do that, so I did, and left Burnett. So, you know, this is 2 jobs. I'm thinking, oh man, I must be rubbish or something. And I might have been. What I wasn't was indispensable. And that would be there's a little gem in there somewhere that when you get your job, make yourself indispensable. The Clemenger thing was a politics thing, and I'll come back to that as well. So, you know, you get caught up in politics and you back the wrong side and, you know, they do restructures and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't really always get sacked just because I was completely crap. So sometimes there's more than talent involved. And that's good news. It's bad news for people who are incredibly talented, because if you're incredibly talented, you can still get sacked. The good news is if you're a talentless hack, you can still get a job, because there's other things that contribute to you getting a job. In fact, on Branson's feed this week was a thing about how he hires, and I think it might have been through LinkedIn. If you don't follow people like that, you know, you should, because they give great advice. And he says he hires on personality. Okay, he said, you know, you can teach people, you know, skills and all that, but you can't teach personality. And so talent is, you know, not the be all and end all. So even, you know, I shouldn't say this, I don't want to get in trouble, but even if you don't get great grades or something like that, it's not the end of the world. I then went, it's great that this logo's blue. I couldn't find one. They haven't been around for a few years. In fact, my art director, it's a true story, actually burnt down the building. He went back one night after a big night out and left a cigarette in the ashtray and burned a 2-story building down. So I went there and worked there, and I learnt one of my really big lessons, because this is really what set my career up. And I know it's an old cliche, but you know, when you get given lemons, make lemonade. And so I was so naive and stupid that I picked a certain client that everyone hated and decided that I was going to kind of, you know, convert them and do really good work for them. And I was just lucky that I didn't actually know any better that probably couldn't be done, and we actually managed to do it. And so at this place I worked with this menswear. It was like a little chain of mum and dad kind of menswear stores where you went and bought a cardigan for your dad, and, you know, no one in a million years would shop there. And weirdly, we sort of ended up making a whole bunch of ads that won awards all over the world. And so it was my first little kind of, you know, sort of shot at kind of doing all right in my career and getting known for something. And you know, one of the things that I see is I see so many people come into the business, whether that's PR or advertising, design, whatever it is, marketing, and they go, oh, I'll show what I'm made of when I've got this kind of dream job working on this, you know, dream brief for this dream client. And of course, it doesn't always work that way. And it's this sort of chicken or the egg thing where sometimes you've got to actually prove what you're capable of and go out and do something fantastic when you don't have an opportunity. Anyone can take, you know, we see it all the time, and I know there's someone from the RSPCA here later or whatever, right? As an advertising agency, that's the brief that you dream of, right? Because your product is puppy dogs. You know, whereas the brief you actually get, you know, is for cardigans that look like something your dad would wear, or, you know, chops for $3.99 or something. That's where you've got to show what you're made of. Anyone can do the easy stuff. And actually that's not quite true, because you see plenty of rubbish ads for easy stuff as well. And of course, Charterhouse, that ended well. Had a little disagreement there, and I'm a big mouth, okay, so let's admit to that. And so I went to Singapore, and I went and checked out a job for Singapore, and I worked there. I lasted quite a long time there. It must have been 8 or 9, I think maybe 10 days before the guy who was offering me the job and myself had a little bit of a sort of difference of opinion. And so I sort of just came back to Australia. It was good. And weirdly, I went back and worked at Charterhouse. So even though I'd sort of left under slightly sort of, you know, less than positive circumstances, I was so amazingly talented and had such a great personality that they rehired me. And it was here that I really started to build who I was in the business. And it was great to hear, but I am getting the name right, aren't I? I'm not sort of always saying Vanessa and she's sitting in the back. You know, it was great to hear her say, look, even if you don't get the job, you know, that you really want, then take it anyway, and, you know, sort of lead and all that sort of stuff. But one of the things that I learned was that life's too short to work for. Okay, and so I went back there. At the time, my partner had just found out she was pregnant, And, you know, so having a job was a really important thing. I just got this massive pay rise, and I went overseas, and I was with the managing director of the company and a client, in fact, the cardigan client, we'll call them. And you know, he just said and did a few things that I just went, his values and my values are just too different. And so I quit. And so, you know, I would really say, take any job, no problems about that. Doesn't matter if it's not something you're super passionate about, but there will be or may be occasions where the things that companies do or the way they operate are really against your value system. If you've got to pay the rent or you've got mouths to feed or whatever, I get that, but don't be afraid to, you know, sort of take the leap sometimes. I really stand by that one because I've done it, and it's probably to my detriment at times, but I think it's a really important tip. I then worked at a place called Total Brand Management Group. So by now I've learnt my lesson. I've decided that I don't ever want to get fired again. So I only joined this company on the proviso that I can be on the board so that I can't get fired. And I got fired. They merged with another company, and I went overseas for a month, came back, and they said, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is the merger's on, the bad news is you're not in it. So I thought, okay. And the best thing about this, right, is this is about 10 years ago now, and I've never seen the managing director who I used to run this company with, right? I went to Melbourne, ran the office, and I've never seen him until 5:30 this morning when I got to Adelaide Airport, and I parked in my car, because that's what you do in a car. And I looked over, and in the car next to me, it was him getting out of the car, going into the airport as well, and we kind of did that whole awkward sort of shuffle, you know, it was very interesting. So yeah, anyway, so bored, you can still get fired, good lesson to learn. So then I went and did my own thing, and then more recently I did a stint here for Ogilvy, another big agency group over in Southeast Asia, where I did that for a bit of fun. The money was rubbish, but it was an amazing experience, and so, you know, worth thinking about. Now, talking about opportunities, now most of you guys are pretty sort of young, but there was a band called Savage Garden, okay? And there's a guy called Darren Hayes who, you know, collectively they've sold about 25 million records. And the reason this is up here is because I want to talk about opportunities and how you make the most of opportunities. So one of the ways that I've survived in this industry is to do a lot of different things. Now, there's sort of different ideas on whether you should specialise or diversify. The way I've survived is by diversifying. And so it's a little known fact that Darren Hayes rang me during one of his tours a couple of years back and said, you were such an amazing photographer that I would like you to take the photography for my live DVD. And so I took this shot for it, and they used all these photos in the program and stuff. And the reason I tell you this story is because it's absolutely nonsense. It's not what happened at all. And what actually happened was I went to a Darren Hayes concert because I'm, you know, a fan, and I paid extra money to get the, you know, super duper ticket and go in and see soundcheck and all that sort of stuff. And there was a competition where you could go backstage and meet him, and I didn't win that. So I went backstage and met him anyway because I kind of, you know, talked to the lady who happened to be his sister. I didn't know that. I went backstage and I said, oh, you know, and I got in, I met him and said hello, and then I took some photos at the concert. I took my good camera because you can sort of do that sometimes these days. And then what I did was the photos came out pretty well. So I sent them up to her, and I said, oh, I don't know if you remember me. I talked my way backstage, blah, blah, blah. And about 3 or 4 months later, I got a call from them saying, look, they are probably the best photos from the tour, and Darren really wants to use them. Would it be okay if we sent you a check for a certain amount of money and use them around the world for promotion? Now, I don't tell you that story because I'm a great photographer. It was just sort of luck. Some of the photos aren't even that good. But it's about taking opportunities when you least expect them. Okay, and sometimes you've got to kind of talk your way into opportunities. So again, I told you I wasn't really going to talk about what we do as a business. That's not really what we do as a business. It was just something I did on the side. So I'm not here to brag. There really is a point to that. I hope you got it. Now, marketing yourself. Now, there's a few slides in here from the book so you can save yourself some money and just kind of look at the slides. One of the things that I say, and this comes as a great shock to many people, which in turn is a great shock to me, but marketing yourself to get a job is no different to promoting or marketing whatever product you would be marketing or promoting when you've got a job. It's just that you're the product, okay? And so there's a whole heap of fundamentals that you can apply to yourself about how you can go about getting a job. And one of the great ones is this idea that you can have a 30-second elevator pitch. Okay, so an elevator pitch is the name. I guess it comes probably from Hollywood, where the idea is you get into an elevator, the person you most want to pitch your project to gets into the elevator next to you, and you've got until they get out of the elevator to convince them to be part of your project. So to tell them your film idea or to tell them what what kind of job you want. Geez, I'm sucking, am I? Sorry. And so, and what I find is so many people don't have this. So they come to you and they go, kind of want to, be in maybe marketing or maybe this or maybe that or, and they've got no idea, which makes it really hard for people like me. I'm not sort of, generally speaking, a career counsellor. So if someone comes to me and says, this is what I want to do, I can at least point them in the right direction if I can't help. And I do that all the time down in Adelaide. Not so connected up here, so bad luck you guys struck out. But, in terms of, if you tell someone exactly what you want to do, and you can change it for different people, right? You're allowed to have different elevator pitches. So, you can go to Vanessa and say, oh my God, the thing that I've always most wanted to do ever in my life, this is going to sound a little bit unscrupulous, is work for, a great Australian brand in marketing. So, do you have any jobs? And then the next day you hear there's a job going at Clemenger. And you're allowed to go to Clemenger and go, oh my God, the thing that I most want to do today, right, you don't say today, is work in an advertising agency and work on all those great brands that you guys have. Okay, so you're allowed to have different elevator pitches, but you've got to have at least one. These are actual emails, by the way, in their entirety. These are the kind of emails I get. To whom it may concern, I'm currently studying so-and-so at so-and-so. Do you offer any internships or work experience? That's the whole thing. That's the amount of effort they put in. So that's about the amount of effort that I put in. I'm actually normally more polite than that, but, this is a true story. Hi guys, my name is John, currently an employee at Company X. I'm a very creative person seeking a role in so-and-so. Do you have any vacancies? Oh, any vacancies? They probably spelled it right, I spelled it wrong. For someone like myself within your company, possibly. Well, I reckon a very creative person would have written a better email than that and maybe would have sent something more interesting than that. So he gets the same reply. Okay, and then here's the lack of elevator pitch one. I'm pretty much looking for anything entry level, preferably on the creative side of things. At this point, I don't want to limit myself as I'm eager to gain any sort of experience, which is sort of getting closer, but I'm like, I don't know what to do with a person like this, right? There's like, they haven't really put any effort into understanding what those entry level positions would be. So that all gets a bit too hard. Okay, I want people to put a little bit of effort in. And it's not about making people jump through hoops, but this idea that I'll prove how creative I am or how enthusiastic I am when you've given me the job, it's arse about, okay? So I use this when I do talks about marketing all the time, and I say that this applies to consumers. And we all know computers have got certain kinds of firewalls. I think consumers have got it for marketing messages, and so do employers. Okay, the last thing an employer wants to hear is, do you do work experience? Do you have internship? Because it's a pain in the bum, right? So you've got to get past that, and you've got to find ways to do that. And one of the things that you can do is be famous for something. And this is, how am I doing for time, by the way? Okay, cool. I tell this joke, and I'm going to tell the really short and the really G-rated version, right? But there's a village and there's a guy, and a little kid goes up to the guy and says, Bob, why do they call you Bob the goat lover? And Bob goes, it's interesting you should ask that, because every morning I go out at dawn, fish, come back, bring all the fish for the people of the village, but do they call me Bob the fisherman? No. And then he goes, after I've given all the fish, I work making furniture all day for the people of the village. They've got furniture to sit on and eat their dinner on, but do they call me Bob the carpenter? No. But love one lousy goat, right? It's kind of a funny joke when you say the other word. My point being is you can get really famous for just doing one thing. You don't have to do it all the time. You can get sort of well known, and you can get a reputation in the industry. Okay, so for a while I was well known for being the Ed Harry guy, the dad cardigan, sort of place, and I won some awards. I started a website down in Adelaide called AdTown, which then became MadTown, don't ask. And it's where all the jobs and all the news for what's going on, it's sort of like a South Australian version of Mumbrella, but started about the same time. I didn't knock it off, sort of. And it doesn't matter if you do knock it off, you can still be famous in your own town. There you go, there's another example, right? And so I was a little bit for that. That was me when I was about 18 at Clemenger in the dispatch department, and I had to send this silver watering can award off to be engraved. Okay, and the silver watering can is a thing called the President's Award, and it's for outstanding contribution to the industry down in South Australia. And I thought, you know what, one day I'm going to win that thing. And so, a few years ago, I did. It was a bit of a joke, but, I sort of won it, right? So for a while, I was famous for that. But the reason I tell you all this is because, and here, hang on, there's another brag. So, we did work for games, for things like American Idol. You could be famous for that. But you have one big dummy spit, and then when you're in the paper, every time they refer to you, you're dummy spit Sputnik, right? So it can go both ways. It can go positive. You do one really good thing and everyone knows about you. You do one really bad thing, it can go against you as well. And yeah, there's an example, if you don't believe me, that can happen globally, then we've all seen that picture. So do something out of the ordinary. Don't keep it a secret. Running is one of the things that I'm really passionate about. The reason I put this up here is because if you go and do a 5K run, people go, oh yeah, so what, you did, city to surf or whatever it is, it's 14, I know. But you go and do a 100K run right through the mountains and people start to take notice. And you don't even have to win that and you get a medal, right? You just get a finisher's medal, right? It's just you survived, right? So that's one of the things that I did, and so people go, oh, he's that running guy and stuff, right? And then I thought, how do I go one better than running 100K? So I went to Nepal and I went to do this 200K running race. And this is a lady called Lizzie Hawker who's won the toughest race in the world. It's a thing over in Europe called UTMB, the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc. She's gone in it 6 times and won it 5 times. It's just unbelievable, right? So I was going to say run with her. I didn't really, because I saw her for about 10 seconds at the beginning of every day and then she was gone, right? So I went to Nepal to do this race. The reason I tell you that is because she's now part of my network. My next book is about running, so she's contributed to my book. I don't tell you that so that you'll buy my running book. I tell you that because networks are really important. Always be collecting people for your network. That's where we stayed the night that I was helicoptered out, just about to die of altitude sickness. So sometimes you try and go bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can bite off more than you can chew, but that's okay. And just when you think you've done something really cool, like run 200 Ks or almost, there's a guy called Pat Farmer who ran 29,000 Ks from the North Pole to the South Pole. So yeah, I already said this, give me a job and I'll prove how good I am versus prove how good you are and I'll give you a job. So I think that's the paradigm that you guys need to get into, prove how good you are first. You've got a thing called the internet, so you can do anything. You can set up a Facebook page like planking. This is mine, I do one for lounge furniture on the side of the roads, go like it's excellent. Knock on doors, don't just knock on them, knock them down. They don't have to be the front door, okay? You can just find someone else who'll give you an in. I got this email from a guy the other day. A guy came to me wanting to get into advertising, so I gave him a plug through my network. And I got an email back saying, what's the deal with the American guy trying to get in, and that was from the managing director of Clemenger. Okay, so I've got that guy an interview there, so build your network, suck up, do whatever you have to. Everything happens for a reason. Sometimes the reason is that you're stupid and you make bad decisions. Try not to do that like I have. You've seen that, work harder. Nearly there, guys, sorry. Oh, I can talk to you. By the way, I just came to Sydney for this today, right? So I'm going to hang around. So if I didn't bore anyone to death and they want to ask more questions, you can. My last thought is this, right? And I know that you're waiting for me to get off, right? It's just all about numbers, right? So if you ask enough people, someone will say yes eventually. And I know that sounds demoralising or, geez, how many? Well, you know what? 45, maybe 36, maybe 27, I don't know. But there's a number, right? And so if you keep doing it, you'll eventually get there. You've just got to find a way to cut through. And I have a thing called the Job Hunters Bootcamp. The reason I plug that, I don't feel bad plugging it, because it's free. You can go to the website and it's a 10-week course about how to get a job in this industry specifically. I have a book, it's not free. Normally it's $30. I've got a few with me today, it's $20. That's the website. Don't be ordinary, don't give up. That's my final thought. Sorry to take so long, but thanks.
Thanks, Sputnik. I just got a couple of quick questions before you go. So firstly, you spoke about, I guess standing up for your values, your beliefs in your job, and you had a few, encounters of your own. A lot of us are going to be, going out into the workforce our first year, sort of outside of uni. Would you say that that's still an important thing to have, even though we'll be just juniors entering the workforce, or what's your opinion on that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think one of the things, and I hate sounding old, when people go, when I was a boy, but I do see a lot of people who don't know how to suck it up. Okay, so I think when you first get into a job, there's a lot of sucking it up that goes along with that, which means you do all the crappy things and you do all the things that you don't want to do. And so I think within reason, that means if you think the boss is a bit of an idiot, you don't need to tell him that he's an idiot. You can say that down the pub with your mates. I think the values thing kicks in when it's a high level value conflict. In other words, if it's something, I don't know, homophobia or sexism or dishonesty at, a corruption level or whatever. And mine was certainly I always knew the guy was a bit of a dick, right? But when I saw him operate at a certain level, I went, you know what, I can't contribute to that. So would I have done that if I'd been a complete junior? Probably not. I would have, and I probably wouldn't have known about it, what's more. So, yeah, I think you've got to put up with a lot as a junior. And I loved it that when someone said, is it really that bad? And Vanessa said, yes. I mean, you know, there's some angst, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I just got one more question as well. You also spoke about, obviously, your time in Singapore and, you know, traveling and working overseas. I know personally that's interest for me. I'm sure there are a couple of you out there as well who might find an interest in working overseas. How did you find that? And, you know, what tips can you give us into, you know, is it a daunting experience? Did you enjoy it? Do you learn from it? You know, what's the whole working overseas thing like?
Yeah, wow, that's another good question. Working overseas was obviously Singapore, not so much. It was pretty short, right? Cambodia was where I was based. So I was based in Phnom Penh, and it was just the time of my life. I mean, it was really hard, right? So I went over there to take a copywriting job just because I wanted to change. I'd broken up with my partner, blah, blah, blah. And I ended up being 2IC of a company. So I had 35 people on my team. A lot of them didn't really speak English very well, let alone know what advertising was. So I would start work at maybe 7 in the morning, finish maybe 11 o'clock at night. I still do that, by the way. So it doesn't always get easy. That's why being passionate comes in handy. But in terms of what I got over there was experience and opportunities that I would never have gotten anywhere in Australia. Okay, now if you wanted to work overseas, it's a bit like saying I'm from Adelaide, right? There's a few people in this room at least who are going to go, well, we've got a country guy, we've got R.M. Williams and we've got another guy from the country, from Adelaide, right? But if I come to Sydney, right, and it doesn't matter, or if you're in Sydney, it's very hard to get the big opportunities. You go to New York and work in an ad agency, you can work for years and never have a piece of work published, right? You sort of constantly pitch, but they're so competitive and so big that you just might not ever have a piece of work get out there. And so you go somewhere like Phnom Penh, which is like the Adelaide of Southeast Asia compared to, you know, Sydney might be like Hong Kong or Singapore or something. And, you know, I'm working on Caltex and Unilever and all these brands and doing all this stuff that I would never have had the chance to do here. And it wasn't without its hardships, but, you know, it was just amazing. So, yeah, I would strongly recommend it. And just you know, if you don't have... By the way, it's probably much easier to do it now than when you've got kids and, you know, all that sort of stuff as well. Sorry, I talk a lot.
Brilliant. Well, we probably just have run out a bit of time for personal questions, but like Sputnik said, he'll be here for a bit afterwards. So if you want, approach him. But Sputnik, thank you for the talk, and
Thank you.
Give him a round of applause.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.